What is up guys, Cardfight here, and today I'm back with another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. So yeah, we're doing 2 in a row because I'm currently running dry on Digimon content until the next booster comes out at the end of this week. So we're going to be continuing with the Vanguard deck profiles for a bit. So yeah, let's go over the Krysrain deck. So this is the lyrical support, obviously with the new DZ line of cards coming out. Lyrical is part of the main nations now, so we don't have to wait once or twice a year for our sets, which I'm very happy about. So yeah, let's go over Krysrain. She's a really fun deck to play. She plays kind of like a Highlander deck, but not exactly, because you want to have different cards on the field, but you're not restricted to it, so it's a little bit more flexible than a true Highlander build. So yeah, let's get on right with the deck profile. So we're just running the Krysrain line. I think the line itself is pretty good. So the grade 1 and grade 2 just lets you flip the top card of your deck on ride. So when you ride the grade 2 on the grade 1, you can flip. And when Krysrain rides on the grade 2, you can also flip. And basically, if it is a grade same or lower than that card, then you'll be able to just call it. And if not, you can add it to your hand. And if it's a trigger unit, you can add it to your hand. So it's pretty solid. You just get a plus no matter what. So I definitely think it's pretty good, pretty aligned, especially with this build. And Krysrain's skill, it's active skill once per turn, kind of lasts 1, and then you can activate one of the following skills. If you have 4 cards on the field with different names, you can activate 2 of those skills. And if you have 5 or more cards with different names, you can activate all 3 of them. So the first one is draw 1 and then energy charge 3. The second skill is choose one of your units and give it plus 15k. And the second skill is third skill, is to give it plus 1 crit. So most of the time you will be adding all the effects to your Krysrain because we have a really strong new booster in this deck that just gives it guard restrict. So you want your opponent to guard her as much as possible so that you can just have them waste all of their PGs and then just hopefully go for a game. And then the divine skill is after this card attacks at grade 3, you can return all of your rear guards back to your hand, and then you can choose a unit from your hand and call it to a rear guard circle, and then that unit's power and crit will be the same as this one. So that's why you most of the time will be giving all the effects to this one, because you want to bait your opponent to think you're going to be using your divine skill. And since the effect activates at the end of your attack, you can choose when to use it. So if you don't trigger crit, so if you're not swinging for 3 crits, nah, I'm not going to use it. So very, very good for that. This is, for the most part, a 3 attack deck though, until you do get your divine skill. So it is lacking a little bit that way, but yeah, we have some ways to do multi-attacks, but it's not happening often. So you have to be really strategic about how you plan out your attacks. So yeah. For the rest of the grade 3s, we're just going to be running 3 more Krysrain just so you can persona ride. For the level of the level 3s, we're going to be running 3 of the Adelheid. So this is the generic lyrical support that came out in DSS-05. So her ability is pretty much the same as Sages for the first skill. Whenever your opponent drive checks or damage checks something, then this card gets plus 10k power and plus 10k shield. So you can use her as a shield if they do drive check at trigger, which is pretty nice. And then the second ability is when this card attacks and is boosted at the end of the attack, you can Soul Blast 1 to choose one of the following effects to use. So you can either choose one of your other regards in the same column as this and bounce it to your hand, which is pretty nice, because sometimes you will be forced to call triggers. So if you call a trigger behind her, you'll still be swinging for 18k, which is enough to force another increment of shield, which is okay. And the second ability you can choose is to remove an over trigger from the drop zone to choose one of your units with a grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and call it to a rear guard circle. So this is another way that you can do a multi-attack, but that will require you to draw into your over trigger and have it in the drop zone. So it's not super ideal, but it does give you another option for a multi-attack, so that is nice. Next, for the other level 3s, we are grade 3s. We're running the DZ-BT02 support. I think her name is Elva. So, if this one of the skill card skill is in the front row rearguard circle, all units with a different card named in this card cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects. And then the second ability is when this card attack hits, you can countercharge 1. So she does add a little bit of pressure, which is really nice. So running one of her. I was running her too, but I feel like she doesn't push for numbers. So I'm not running her at more than 1 right now. But if you find like you have countercharging issues, I think she is pretty good to run at 2. So yeah, running one of her. We're also running one of the new rares, Krysrain support from DZ-BT01. So this one is basically what if you attack a grade 3 and you have a Krysrain Vanguard grade 3, you can counterblast 1 to give this card plus 15k. So it will be a 28k attacker. And if you do use your divine skill with this one, then you can just give all the stats from your Krysrain to her, and then since this activates on attack, you can give an additional 15k, which does help push out for more shield. Because ideally, you want your opponent to waste all the perfect guards on your Vanguard, right? So that will give your rear guards bigger attack power, and it'll force your opponent to guard with more cards in hand. If they use a perfect guard, that's great, because even if you do use a divine skill, they'll have one less perfect guard to guard your main Vanguard the next turn, and you will be swinging for 2 crit. So yeah, it'll be pretty scary. Next, we're going to be running 4 of the Krysrain support triple rare from DZ-BT01. So on call, if you have a Krysrain Vanguard, you can counterblast 1 and energy blast 3 to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then call a card that's different from one of your rearguard circles and Vanguard, and call it to a field, and then you can shuffle your deck. So she's pretty solid. This deck actually uses quite a lot of energy blast, so the energy blast you get from Krysrain is kind of important. And the second ability is if this card is attacking a grade 3 or above unit, if you have 4 or more different units on the board, you can get plus 10k. So pretty solid. 20k attacker, pretty solid. It is better than the Raziel one because you don't have to pay a cost. You just need to have 4 different units on the board. So I think she is better in that way. And yeah, since we're running so many different cards with different names on the board, in the deck, I mean, sorry, hitting one of the 5, having a card with a different name is not hard, especially since we're running different trigger names. So even if you have a call trigger, that's not too bad. We have ways to bounce it back. So yeah. Next, we're running 2 Melties. So this is one of the OG good stuff lyrical cards. So on the main phase, when this card's called, you can counterblast 1 to choose a card with a grade equal or less than your Vanguard, to call it to the rearguard circle, and then if you called, you can draw 1. So most of the time you will be calling, so you'll be able to just draw 1 with her and hopefully dig into another piece that you need. There have been games where I had a handful of triggers, and using her, you just build up your board using them. So yeah, it does get tough sometimes, but you want to have cards that help you generate advantage so that you can fix your board and just have cards with different names on the field. Next, we're running 2 of the old Ride Cycler. Ride Cycler. And most of the time you won't be using the Inherit ability. You might if you have extra counterblast on your divine skill turn, but most of the time you'll just be using her for the discard ability. But it is still pretty strong. It just gives your on call of your Persona Ride counterblast 1, gives your Vanguard the ability to give all your front row units plus 5k, a continuous ability. So it does help you push for numbers, especially if your opponent's low on hand. So she's pretty good, but not a mandatory 4-up, I think. And we're running 2 of the new Ride Cycler. I think her on-call ability is not as strong in this deck, but it's still pretty good. You can just on-call, if you persona this turn, you can counterblast 1 or energy blast 3 to choose one of your units, give it plus 5k, and if it's rear guard, it'll bounce back to your hand at the end of the turn. So it'll help you bump your triggers to a 10k if you need it, and just have it use it as a shield for the opponent's turn. So she can be pretty good. Next, we're running 4 of the Krysrain grade 1 double rare from DZ-BT01. When she boosts Krysrain, you can energy blast 3 to guard or trigger opponent. They have to either call a sentinel or call cards with 3 different grades from their hand. So sometimes they just don't have it and they'll just die. If they do, that's great. You're forcing at least a sentinel or 3 cards from their hand, which is actually really good. So yeah, especially since your Vanguard's gonna have an extra crit. So most of the time they'll be guarding starting at 3 damage, which is really nice. Next, for the other great ones, we're running 1 Yuika. You can bump her up to 2 if you want, but I think she's not as great because on the times when you do have to call triggers on the board, you'll be swinging for 18k, which is not amazing, but they kind of have the same use, except this one is a extra 5k shield, I guess. But yeah, it's up to you guys. You should kind of adjust it to your liking. Next, we're running 1 Aura. So Aura, on boost, if you hit, you can retire this unit and grab a order card from your deck to your hand. So most of the time you're going to grab the Sentinel order or the Regalius piece. Just running 1. If you get early game, that's great because you have a little bit of pressure. Most of the time they're just going to let it hit. If that's the case, you can just fetch your order cards. If not, then you still have a unit with a different name on the board, which is still fine. Next, we're running 2 Eileens. So Eileen, most of the time you'll be swinging on one of your columns first, just to peek. So when this card boosts a rear guard, you can look at the top card of your deck, and you can either put it to the top or bottom. So that's really good, because you can potentially, if you see a crit, you're like, haha, your opponent's going to be like, you can play like a bit of a mind game with your opponent, even if it's not a crit. If it's like a card that you really want in your hand, it's like, oh, I'm going to put it on top, and your opponent's going to think, oh, it's probably a crit. So they're going to they're probably going to guard it. So they don't want to die at 3 damage, so they're going to guard it. So pretty good. Next, we're running 2 of the Carbuncles just for extra shield. But the on-call skill is fine. Lets you grab a card with the same name as your Vanguard or unit in your soul. Same name as unit in soul. And add it back to your hand. So, yeah. So next we're going to be running 2 Garbuncles just for a little bit of extra shield. But sometimes if you need to persona ride, the on-call skill is okay as well. So we're running 2 of those. Next we're running 2 of the generic Krysrain support grade 1. I think all of the faded ones have this. It's just plus 5k attack and 5k shield. So we're running this just because it is a 13k booster, so when it's boosting your grade 2s, you can either swing for 23k columns or 33k columns, which is pretty nice. And you can bounce this back to your hand if you need it with your other stuff. So she's nice. And 10k shield is having 10k shield in your hand feels good. So we're running 2 of those. And then for the PGs, we're running 3 different named PGs, just in case you do need to call them out and you have a way to bounce it back to your hand. You have these as your options. We have the Elementaria Sentinel. We have the Regalius piece. You can run the Cup if you want, but I think this one is a bit better in this deck. so you can survive a bit more. You know, this Regularity piece is very expensive for a reason. And for the crits, we're running running 8 crits with different names. So 8 crits. Running 3 fronts. These can be draws. I just feel like it feels really bad when you counterblast one with Krysrain and you draw into a draw. So I like to draw into the fronts more. But if you want to run the draws, that's perfectly fine as well. But yeah, I think the 20k shield is a little bit more helpful sometimes. But if you want to run the draws, that's perfectly fine. And then for heals, running 4 heals with different names, just so you can increase your chance of having having units with different names on the board. So that is the most Highlander thing about this deck. Your triggers. And we're running the blue OT. So this one is very, very good in Krysrain because when you check it, you're going to be giving it all to your Krysrain. So when you use a divine skill, your rearguard will also have 100 million power with the crit. So with 2 crit, or 3 crit, including the crit that you get from ability. So that's very, very scary. So yeah, overall, this deck is pretty fun to play. But since this is like a Highlander-ish deck, there is a little bit of consistency issues compared to some of the other decks that came out in the set. But nonetheless, this deck is still super fun to play. I miss kind of playing like a Highlander-like deck in the game, and this deck sort of scratches the itch. But we're running more of the Krysrain support just because it does help boost your consistency, and you know this card is so good. It sort of makes up for having a normal turn with 3 attacks. Just forcing PGs out is pretty good, and you're swinging for pretty big numbers, so that's pretty nice as well. So even if you don't attack your opponent with your rearguards and just control the damage, you can kind of like pick off all of their rearguards. We do have a little bit of problem with matchup against Vanguard just because they will retire front row, and then you're gonna have to replace those cards, which feels bad. But for the most part, it's fine. Anyway, that's pretty much for this deck profiles. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. But yeah, this is Kuro Taku, and I'll see you guys next time.